Hello everyone, it's me again. I know I haven't posted in a hot minute, but I've been playing this interesting build, cast on crit Manabond Occultist, and it was stronger than I thought, so I thought I'd make a quick video about it. So the build that you're seeing here is basically just cast on crit Manabond, just straight up, no Mjollnir or any mechanics or anything. It is using the 7.57 APS breakpoint to basically cast Manabond over and over again at a rate of 7.57 times per second ideally. And so the way that this build works is a little bit weird. So Manabond is a skill that deals flat lightning damage, and it also gains bonus flat damage depending on how much unreserved maximum mana you have. So if you're at full mana, like you are in mapping, you have the maximum AoE. But if you have like very low mana, like ideally if you have like 0 mana for instance, you're going to be at maximum damage. And if you have like around 4k mana, your single target damage ends up being like roughly anywhere from 2 to 4 times your mapping DPS, depending on how much mana you're missing. So as you can see here, the single target damage is actually pretty good. The theory of this build is to use Arcane Cloak and Divine Blessing to make your mana go to 0 so that you can maximize your damage on single target, but then sometimes you will run out of mana, obviously, and this can be mitigated by reducing the mana cost of Manabond and carrying a mana flask to use when your mana hits 0. So to illustrate how this would work. So like in mapping, your mana is always going to be at full because you have 2% mana on kill from the skill tree. But on single target, you hit Arcane Cloak to delete 67% of your mana, and then you press Divine Blessing to delete another like 10% of your mana. Divine Blessing in this case is linked to like Wrath, but you could also link it to Zealotry. And then ideally you have 25% minus mana cost to spells crafted on a flask, and then you also take a bunch of minus mana cost in a skill tree, and this ideally allows you to reduce the cost of your mana bond to around 50 mana. And if your mana bond costs 50 mana, if you trigger it 7.57 times a second, your mana cost is approximately like 400. That is including Cyclone and all the triggers and everything. So ideally, I found that if you can keep your mana regen equal to around 250, and then your mana cost equal to 400, you can actually achieve 0 mana very quickly if you pop Arcane Cloak and Divine Blessing. And then once you hit 0 mana, you just pop a mana flask, which you're always going to have because you make it have the prefix flask gains a charge whenever you deal a critical strike. So you basically have this weird build where you make your mana hit 0 and then you use your mana flask to recover it, and ideally you keep your mana at exactly 0 on single target for maximum scaling of damage. So that's basically the theory of this build, and I've been able to do like quote-unquote all content with it, which was surprising to me because I didn't think it would be very good. It clears really well in maps, and the single target is also pretty decent if you are able to hit 0 mana cost consistently. I haven't tried it on Uber bosses yet, or Sim 30, or any of that like super endgame content, so I'm not 100% sure if it will work in content like that. But I've done Cirrus, I've done Maven, Conquerors and Guardians are fairly easy. Nobody saw that I died there, but whatever. And yeah, that's basically the build. So this build I've been able to get around 8 million DPS in single target in PoE. I don't know if it's exactly accurate though. I think the average DPS comes out to be like 6 million or something, because you can't really consistently be at low mana all the time, right? Like if there's like a phase in the boss or they teleport away, your mana's gonna go up. So I found like the overall DPS to be like 25% of whatever PoE 25% less than whatever PoE shows, which in this case is around 6 mil, which is still pretty good. And it definitely feels like a 6 million DPS build when everything is ramping and everything is good. And then for defenses, we have like around 6.5k ES. The character here is only level 93, so it's like not optimal yet, and a lot of my gems are 1920 or whatever, so. But yeah, in PoE I've been able to get around 6.5k ES on this build, and then the main source of defense is glancing blows. We have 75 glancing block here. As you can see, the damage is like pretty good on single target. I just like insta-phase Cirrus. But yeah, so the main defense is comboing glancing block with a 5% ES on block shield. This basically makes you immune to all little hits, basically. And then the only thing you have to worry about is getting enough ES to not get 1-shot or 2-shot or 3-shot by like consecutive big hits. And then in addition to that, because we are Occultist, we have stun immune due to Val Bastion, and we also get around 10% ES per second recovery in mapping from Val Bastion, and then of course 2% ES on kill from the skill tree. So the defense is actually not that bad. Oh yeah, and then I also went, what do you call it? Ghost Leech? Ghost Reaver, which doubles your energy leech per second. And with that, I've been able to get roughly like 2k to 2.5k energy shield leech per second, which I thought was pretty decent for the build. It basically makes you immune to like ignites and other little dots as long as you can keep hitting on, you know, an enemy and like leeching. So that's been pretty good. I would definitely say that the build does have weaknesses though. Like, it is prone to dying to random bursts of damage. Like, if you take 2 hits that are pretty big, you have a pretty high chance of dying, which is kind of sus. And it is pretty low on armor as well. I haven't really been able to fit a lot of armor on this build because the amount of reservation you have is very limited. Oh yeah, that's another thing I wanted to talk about. So, because this build, like, because you need a large amount of unreserved mana for Manabond to have maximum damage, you actually have to be very careful about how you reserve auras. So like, I basically only have precision reserved right now because it basically takes no reservation. But because you don't want to reserve auras and mana, you have to reserve them in life. So that's why I decided to go low life with this build. I ended up going low life with a scrubz and a ES on block shield. And as you can see here, I'm actually using arrogance support to put 3 auras in my life. In this case, I'm using Discipline for ES, Tempest block for spell block. Tempest shield. And then I'm also using Clarity to help with mana regen. And yeah, I wish there was a way for me to reserve more auras. Like maybe you could run an Essence Worm or something, but I didn't have it in SSF, so didn't get the chance. But yeah, that's basically the archetype. It's like some weird mana hybrid Pain Attunement low life scrubz build. But yeah, I've been playing it for a while and it's actually been, you know, pretty good. And the quality of life is pretty good with Cyclone and Profane Blue. The explosions feel really good in clearing, and the single target is decent as well. We're also immune to shock because of Tempest Shield, and immune to freeze from the Pantheon, cannot be chilled, you can get on the boots. And you get bleed immune on the flask, and then burning ground immunity from your Pantheon. So basically the only ailment that you really have to worry about is ignite and poison. And which can be kind of annoying because a big ignite and a big poison could kill you if you're not leeching. But as long as you're leeching, you should be fine. So yeah, that's about it for defense. And then for the cast on crit mechanics specifically, I ended up using Awaken Cast on Crit in this build because I was lucky and dropped it, but I think the optimal breakpoint for this build is 14% CDR or 7.57 APS. I don't want to go into Cast on Crit mechanics too much in specific because there's a lot of info online about that, but generally I would say you need to go for 14% CDR, 7.57 APS, which you can get either from Awaken Cast on Crit or a Shaper and Crusader boot, Shaper or Crusader influence boot. You could also get it on a belt, but I prefer not to because you can get a lot more damage on a belt. I am using mageblood in this build because I was lucky and dropped it in SSF, but I would say it's definitely not necessary. The only thing that mageblood really does in this build is make it easier for you to get 100% crit, because using the diamond flask with all that increased flask effect it really helps you reach 100% crit chance. But I would definitely not say that mageblood is necessary, because you could easily hit 100% crit chance through other means if you really wanted to. Not that you even have to hit it all the time for optimal DPS, but yeah, so that's basically the build. And then I guess I can talk about the gems next. So give me 1 second. Okay, yeah, so for the skills in this build, the main thing that we're going to be using is a 6-link cast on crit Cyclone Manabond. So it's going to be Cyclone, ideally awakened cast on crit, but you can also use normal if you get the 14% CDR elsewhere. And then Manabond, increased critical strikes, increased critical damage, and lightning pen. If you're mapping, I would recommend using either Awakened Spell Cascade or Spell Cascade, because it greatly increases your clear, and it ends up being really cool with all the explosions. But for single target, definitely swap in Lightning Penetration to get that extra damage. And then we have a couple of auras here. We have Precision, which we're going to reserve in mana, which ends up being okay because if you have 4k mana, reserving Precision is really not that big of a deal. And Precision is probably the most important aura in the build because it allows us to hit 100% accuracy and 100% crit chance a lot more easily, which can be kind of hard to get on Occultist. And then other than that, we have a couple of auras that we reserve in life. So we're going to be doing Arrogance, Discipline, Clarity, and Tempest Shield. Discipline is just for getting ES. Tempest Shield is for getting a lot more spell block, which helps a lot to max out your spell block for glancing blows to work properly with ES on block. And then we have Clarity, which helps you regenerate a little bit more mana. If you use Arrogance support, you probably won't be able to level the Clarity very high due to mana restrictions, but I found this to be a setup that works generally. And then for the other gems here, we have Assassin's Mark, Mark on Hit. Manabond cannot apply this directly, but the way we're applying this is Cyclone, because Cyclone is an attack which allows you to apply Mark on Hit, which is pretty cool because this is like a spell build. And then Dash, Second Wind for movement, although you can use whatever movement skill you like. And then we have Arcane Cloak, which is also another important skill. Arcane Cloak, increased duration, Arcane Surge. So you basically just press this button to gain a bunch of Arcane Shield, and then as well as a buff that gives you added lightning damage. And also you spend 67% of your mana, which allows you to max out your single target damage from Manabond more easily. And then we have Wrath, Divine Blessing, increased duration efficacy. The Wrath Blessing is just there to give you a lot more spell damage. So yeah. And then finally we have Sigil of Power. I haven't found Sigil of Power to be terribly useful. You could technically run something else in this slot if you wanted to, but I found Sigil of Power to be, it gives you like a little bit more damage. You basically just make sure that to keep your mana cost like around like 50. And if you can drain like 400 mana per second, you'll achieve max stages of Sigil of Power like in 4 to 6 seconds, which is like decent against certain bosses. And yeah, that's basically it for the gems. And then here we have the skill tree. Let me take a drink of water. So this is a skill tree that I've come up with. This is like a skill tree that focuses on energy shield because we are low life, as well as mana, and then also picking up crit where we can. And we are an occultist, and this is the ascendancy layout. It does feel kind of weird to play occultist with this build because you don't get any bonus lightning damage, but we do get a lot of other bonuses. We get Forbidden Power, which allows you to get max power charges pretty easily because gain a power charge on spending 200 mana is trivial when your cast on crit Manabond spends 400 a second. So you basically get max power charges in like 3 seconds, which is pretty cool. And also each power charge then gives you 6% AoE. So this is like 42% bonus AoE in this build with 7 power charges, which is pretty good. And then you get Vile Bastion, which allows you to not be stunned and also regenerates your ES a little bit. and you take Profane Bloom for the clear, and also allowing your curses to affect hexproof enemies, which is nice. And then you use Malediction for giving you a little bit more damage, a little bit more defense, and also letting you apply conductivity in addition to Assassin's Mark. So that's the Pantheon, the Ascendancy. You could probably build this with one of the Templar Ascendancies. You may be able to make Inquisitor work with Inevitable Judgment or whatever. Or you might even be able to make Hierophant work. I'm not really sure. I just wanted to play Occultist because of the bonus AoE and the Profane Bloom. I thought that would be really cool. And yeah, so the skill tree here, we basically focus on a couple things. We focus on Energy Shield quite a bit because we are ultimately an ES-based build. So you take as much of that as you can. And then also you need crit chance. You need crit chance ideally at 100% so you can max out what you get from cast on crit. And then you also need to take this wheel here, Depth Perception, because it helps you a lot to get accuracy, as well as this one over here. And then you also need to take a lot of, well, you don't need to take a lot of minus mana stuff, but I would recommend pathing through Righteous Decree to increase your mana and decrease your mana cost, and then Anoint Dreamer as well to get more single target damage with more mana, and also 10% reduced mana cost of skills. And ideally you want to shoot for a PoE value of around 3%. The value here is not entirely accurate. You really need to go in game and mouse over the Manabond icon to tell you exactly how much mana it costs, because PoE only displays percentage, but it actually costs a flat mana amount. So you need to check your character sheet to make sure that your mana cost is roughly around 50. And then we also invest pretty heavily into mana. You see here we take Mind Drinker and stuff, Arcane Will, and then just whatever mana nodes that we can take to get as high of a mana pool as we can. And then also power charges, of course. We get +1 here, +1 here, and +1 here. And then Ghost Reaver for ES Leech. This little RMR cluster is really important because we need 30% increased life preservation efficiency of skills. This allows us to reserve both Discipline and Tempest Shield into our life pool, which is critical for this build. And yeah, other than that, just take as much damage as we can get. Stormweaver gives us a lot of damage, and then you have a bunch of random stuff. Oh, you also need to get 75/75 block through Glancing Blows, so definitely take that as well. And then also Pain Attunement because we're low life. And then as for the jewels of this build, we have a Thread of Hope here, which gives us Heart of Thunder, Breath of Lightning, and Arcane Will, all of which increase our damage by quite a bit, so I totally recommend this. And then I recommend also using a Militant Faith. And Militant Faith with Dominus allows you to get Inner Conviction, and this node gives you 3% more spell damage per power charge. So if we have 7 in this build, then you can get 21% more damage, which is pretty sick. And if you're playing Trade League, you can probably get more than 7 power charges. So you could get even more damage than is in this PoB. And if you use this jewel in this socket, you have to be careful because you don't want it to override any of these nodes, because Militant Faith randomly overrides certain nodes. So you don't want your Militant Faith to override Faith and Steel or Overcharge, because those are important, giving you power charge and energy shield. So that's basically a skill tree. We don't use any clusters. I haven't found any clusters to be better than what you could take on the skill tree. If I could make any improvements to this, if I could have a couple more skill points, I would love to path through Blast Radius and get the bonus AoE, because this build is it definitely feels a lot better with more AoE. But other than that, I think this tree is pretty solid, and it's the best tree that I could come up with, requiring level 95. Yeah. And then going on to the items, let me take another drink of water. So a lot of this gear is actually, I would say, I don't know how budget friendly it is because I don't play Trade League, but a lot of this gear is very easily attainable. I'll just go through it real quick. So I do have Mageblood here, but again, this build does not need Mageblood. The only thing that Mageblood really helps is, like I said before, maximizing your crit chance, but you could definitely find other ways to do that that are not Mageblood. I just have it because I was lucky and I dropped it. But for the weapon, you're going to want a weapon like this. The most important stats on the weapon is actually crit chance. Getting the local crit chance on your weapon allows you to hit 100% crit chance a lot more easily. And for the weapon base, I chose to use Imperial Scan because it seemed to have the best ratio of attacks per second and base crit chance. Because attacks per second is important to reach the 7.57 breakpoint. And then of course you need high base crit. And then other than the local 27% increased crit chance or whatever, just get as much damage as you can. Getting local attack speed helps to hit your APS breakpoint, but is not necessary because you can get it elsewhere. And then getting plus level of gems helps tremendously to scale your Manabond damage. And if you can like sneak in crit multi or spell damage or whatever, that's pretty good as well. So yeah, that's the weapon. And then for the shield, I recommend using a Shaper or Crusader influenced Titanium Spirit Shield. Titanium is good because of the 25% chance to block and the high base ES. And then you need Shaper or Crusader influence to roll 5% ES when you block. And then other than that, you just get as much ES as you can on the shield. It's really important to get a lot of ES on the shield because of this cluster here. This cluster allows you to get a lot of bonus ES depending on the energy shield value of your shield. So I would definitely recommend getting a large amount of ES on your shield. And then it also helps you to get more crit multi with this mastery. 1% crit multi per 10 ES on shield. You could also, in theory, get like plus level of gems on your shield if you have like enough budget, but I don't know if that's even better than flat ES because you really need flat ES on this build much more than damage. And then for the helmet, I used a Crown of the Inward Eye. Ideally, you get some kind of Manabond damage enchantment or whatever. And then you just get one with like a pretty big roll of like increased global ES. And this is good because it gives transfiguration of soul and mind, allowing increases to mana and energy shield to apply to your damage. So it's like really good. As you can see, if I remove Crown of the Inward Eye, my damage goes down from 8 mil to 6.5 mil. And that's just to illustrate how much damage we get from the transfiguration. So definitely best in slot for sure. And then for the body, you need a 6-link shavs because that's the build, low life shavs. For gloves, the gloves and the boots in this build is flexible. Probably the most flexible in this entire build. I haven't found a glove or a boot that like is really necessary for this build, so I just decided to go with rares that give you ES and res. I think it's important to get accuracy on the gloves though, because this build does suffer from a little bit of low accuracy being an occultist and having like low dex. So if you can get like accuracy on your gloves, that's a big help. Other than that, just go for like max ES. And then for the implicits, the Eldritch implicits, if you get lightning exposure on hit, that's pretty cool. Otherwise, if you can get like Unnerve as well, that's also pretty nice for bonus spell damage. And then the boot, you can basically just get energy shield and res. But I would say that the boot is a pretty good opportunity to roll Cannot Be Chilled, since you're basically not looking for any mods other than life and res, so, or ES and res, so it's pretty easy to get Cannot Be Chilled in this slot. And then for the amulet, I would say that there's a couple of choices here for the amulet. Like you could probably go Omni or like Ashes, or even Impresence with Conductivity. There's like a lot of different options here, but I would say like the most budget option is just a Blue Pearl amulet. This allows you to get a lot more mana regen, which helps you sustain your mana bond at low mana. And then other than getting Blue Pearl amulet, you would just go for like ES and res. And if you can sneak in like plus level of gems, that would be nice as well. If you can get like a +2 amulet for like lightning and like all gems or like in gems, that would also be pretty good. Oh yeah, and then I also forgot to mention, this build also scales on mana. So ideally you want mana on every single item. So ideally every item that's rare is like plus flat mana, plus ES, and then like plus res. And then for the 2 rings, I'd recommend Opal rings for the elemental damage base. And I tested it. Opal rings do give more single target damage than cerulean rings, so definitely go for Opal. And then if you can get accuracy on your rings, that actually helps tremendously to reach 100% accuracy. But if you can't get that, no big deal. Again, just go for like flat ES, flat mana, and res. And then I would recommend getting 1 ring with conductivity on hit, just for quality of life. And then, so yeah, again for the belt, I have mageblood here, but if you didn't use mageblood, you'd probably just use like a crystal belt. You would just use a crystal belt with like flat ES, flat mana, craft on armor ES, and just get a bunch of res on that. And you might even be able to get a bit of damage if you drop like some Crusader influence or whatever. But yeah. So that's basically the build. And then for unique jewels, again, we need Militant Faith of Dominus, and then Thread of Hope medium. And oh yeah, I forgot to mention the Watcher's Eye. So you don't need a Watcher's Eye per se. You could easily just go for like a quad multi-jewel, or like, you know, 3 multi and then 8% ES or whatever. But if you can get like a Watcher's Eye with like anything Wrath, that helps out a lot. Wrath, precision, clarity, you know, that kind of stuff is a big help. And other than that, what's left is just flasks. So the most important flask here is Diamond Flask, because Diamond Flask allows you to reach 100% crit chance a lot more easily. Other than that, you can basically just take whatever. Quicksilver Flask is nice for movement, and then Granite Flask. I would say Granite Flask is actually mandatory, because if you don't have Granite Flask, you basically have no armor. So the Granite Flask is like single-handedly giving you like 10k armor. So definitely take one of those. And the last flask can be just whatever. I took Sulfur just to get a bit more damage, but you could also use like a Bottled Faith or whatever, or like even a Basalt if you really wanted to. You can just use whatever you want in this. And then, oh yeah, also another important flask is the Mana Flask. So because in this build, because your mana cost is greater than your mana regen, you need to use Eternal Mana Flask. And ideally you get like a Surgeons or whatever, so you can gain charges when you deal crits. And then you can craft like Cannot Bleed or whatever for more defense. But the main point here is you need to use this flask when you hit 0 mana to keep sustaining your Cyclone mana cost, or your cast on crit mana cost with low mana. So definitely you will need to run one of these mana flasks. Yeah. I lost my train of thought, but yeah, that's basically the gear for this build. Let me see if I missed anything. I don't think I missed anything. Yeah. And I guess the whole puzzle of this build is you need to find a way to get 7.57 attack speed. You can get attack speed on your weapon or your gloves or even on your rings or whatever. Min Frenzy works as well. But you just need a way to get 7.57 APS, 100% crit chance, 100% accuracy, and then you'll be good to go. Just standard cast on crit stuff. Yep. So another thing that I'm kind of like embarrassed about is like this build actually like took me a lot of time to like come up with. I've never played like a weird off meta build like this before, so it was like definitely a challenge to put all the pieces together. And I went through a lot of different variations, so I thought I'd put together like a quick little FAQ section to just answer any questions that may commonly come up that I definitely experienced building this. So number 1 is why don't you use Prism Guardian? So I don't use Prism Guardian because Glancing Blows with 5% ES on block seems like the best and most reliable defense you can get on this build, and Prism Guardian basically sacrifices that defense. So that's why I don't like it. Second question, why no Aegis Aurora? And my answer for that is if you don't reserve mana, it's actually pretty hard to get a lot of armor. And then also you would have to drop a lot of damage to take ES and armor nodes on the tree. And like maybe it could work if you built everything a lot differently to like scale armor, but I haven't tried it and I also don't have Aegis Aurora, so whatever. Question number 3, why not Mjollnir? I mean, you probably could build a variant of Manabond cast on crit with Mjollnir, but not only did I not have it, but also reducing the mana cost to 0 on Mjollnir is not ideal, because then your mana regen will prevent you from staying near 0 mana, causing your single target damage to go down. And also, you can probably get a lot of a better weapon than Mjollnir that has higher base attack speed, higher base crit, and more damage as well. So why not just use a rare Rune Dagger? Question number 4, why low life for a build like this which uses mana? And my answer for that is low life Shav seems to be a pretty good archetype because it gives good damage due to Pain Attunement, and is also easy to leech ES with a hard hitting spell like Manabond. And then you can also reserve a couple of auras like Discipline and Tempest Shield in life. So that works out really well. And that goes into question number 5, which is why not Mind Over Matter? And the reason for that is to get optimal damage with Manabond, you need your unreserved mana to be near 0. Mind Over Matter builds want your mana to be consistently high, so you can absorb your damage to your mana. But with Manabond, we want our mana to be empty, so that's why we don't go Mind Over Matter. And then question number 6, why not life-based? It just seems worse because it's easier to leech ES with spells. And then we can also get scaling from our Crown of the Inward Eye, right? Increases to spell damage and ES then applied to damage. Whereas with the Crown, if you went life, then I don't know, it's weird because life, transfiguration of body makes life increases go to attack damage. So it just seems ideal to use ES. I forget what number we're on, so that's like 5, 6. Question number 7 is how do you get 100% crit chance as an occultist? So Forbidden Power allows you to gain power charges pretty quickly if you spend a lot of mana like you do in this build. So we use power charges, that's important. We get 7 power charges with this build. You could probably get more if you really tried. And then you get local crit chance on your weapon, which helps tremendously, as well as picking a good base like Imperial Skian. And then you take crit chance on your tree a little bit like this. Precision level 20 helps a lot as well. And Diamond Flask helps a lot as well. And if you can get a Flask craft with increased critical chance during Flask effect, that's also pretty good. Yeah. Question number 8. Why only 3k mana? Surely could get more, like 9k mana. So the reason we go 3k mana is because that's like efficient for this build. It's not efficient to get your mana way too high, because then you're scaling your base damage really high without scaling other stuff that is important, like crit and accuracy and flat damage and penetration. And also, it doesn't really make sense to go high mana because you can't go Mind Over Matter. So it just doesn't seem worth it to invest a lot into mana. Question number, I forget what we're on, but do you need AoE on this build, or how do you get AoE? So AoE helps a lot for mapping. And we get a little bit through Amplify and from Forbidden Power. And I felt that in my playtime with this build, Forbidden Power plus Amplify has been enough. But like I would like to get more as well. If I could like path through Blast Radius or like find a way to craft AoE on my gear, I'd be pretty happy. But I haven't really found a way for my current build. And then next question, what are some random alternate versions of this build that could potentially be good? So there's 2 versions of this build that I thought could potentially be really good. The first thing I thought about is using Call of the Brotherhood to convert your damage to cold. And then you could scale cold damage by taking Void Beacon and Frigid Wake. That would be pretty good, be like an interesting idea to convert the lightning damage to cold, but I did not have Call of the Brotherhood in SSF, so I wasn't able to test it, but it really does seem like it could work. It would probably be even better than doing what I have here, because if you're an occultist, you have easy access to bonus cold damage, but you have no way to increase your lightning damage. So yeah, that's probably an archetype that could work. Another thing you could probably do is either build Inquisitor or Hierophant, because Hierophant can give you a lot of reduced mana cost and mana, and power charges and stuff could be good. But annoying thing is that you get 10% of damage taken from mana before life, so it could be difficult to sustain your Manabond mana cost at low mana with Hierophant, because you would be losing mana if you're taking hits, which is annoying. You could also probably do it with Inquisitor, because you get a lot of pen from this node, Inevitable Judgment, and you could probably do some shenanigans where you get a bunch of attributes and get a bunch of crit chance, but I don't know. I wanted to play Occultist because you get 4 nodes that are really good for your build, and you get Profane Bloom, which makes clear pretty good, in addition to starting here, which is really nice as well, because you have easy access to everything that you need on the skill tree. You get the 2% ES on mana on kill and the power charge, and yeah, it just seems to work out pretty well. But yeah, that's basically my build. So like I played this in SSF and I was able to achieve like 8 million PoB damage, which is really more like 6 million because your mana is not always at 0. Defenses are pretty decent. We got 2.2k ES leech with 6.6k ES. Glancing blows block with 5% ES recovered on block. And then 10k armor from the Granite Flask, which gives you 30% physical damage reduction against a 5,000 physical hit. And yeah, that's basically my build. Again, I've had a lot of fun playing this build. I've been able to do all content pretty easily. Haven't tried it on Ubers or Sim30 yet, but I definitely believe if you min-max this build a little bit more, you could definitely do all that content. I just didn't really have the investment or the time to do that, so yeah. Use Lightning Penetration for single target and Awaken Spell Cascade for mapping. Cast on crit Manabond. Occultist, yeah. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments below. I'll do my best to answer as many as I can. Other than that, hope you all enjoyed this little video. I don't know when I'll be posting again, but yeah, thanks for watching.